Don't freeze. Uh-oh.
No, you're good. You're good. Cool. Hey, everyone, live from New York City at the Imagine Easy Solutions offices. It is the latest webinar from Imagine Easy Solutions. Today's session is called Interactive and Explorable Learning with Text-Based Games, presented by Matthew Farber, who is here with me on the Hangout. Before I pass it off to Matt, I do just want to do a little bit of housekeeping for all of our lovely participants and viewers today. Just to give a quick introduction, my name is Emily Gover, and I am the community manager at Imagine Easy Solutions. We are the team behind EasyBib.com, the most popular online citation tool today. And we are also super pumped to announce that we have a new product that we literally just released officially yesterday. It's called Scholar, and it's a digital platform that supports students with their close reading, critical thinking, and ethical writing skills. So you can learn more about our new product, Scholar, at iescholar.com. It's also featured in the Showcase app within the Hangout if you have that feature turned on within the Hangout. So Matt is super knowledgeable on gamification and game-based learning, and we want you to ask questions during today's session. So there are two ways that you can go about doing that. The first way is if you have a Google Plus account and you are viewing the Hangout within the Google Plus website. This is also streaming live on YouTube, but if you're in Google Plus and you're watching the Hangout from there, you can ask questions directly in the Q&A app. And then to access the Q&A app, just above the streaming video of me and Matt right now, you'll see your name and some other icons along the top. Click the icon. It should be next to a question mark, but it sort of looks like a square with other squares within it. And if you click that menu, it will expand and it will show you a couple different apps that you can open up within the Hangout. If you click the blue speech bubble that says Q&A, if you're logged into your Google Plus account, that will open up and you'll see a green button at the bottom that will say ask a new question. So you can just type your question in at any point during the webinar, click submit, and then we'll have that, it'll be viewable publicly. So your name and your display photo will be shown to everyone who has that app open, just to be totally transparent. But that's the easiest way for us to track questions during today's session. However, I understand that not all of you use Google Plus. You may be watching this on YouTube, or maybe you don't want your name and everything to be shown directly in the app. So you can also ask questions through Twitter. The best way to do that is to use the hashtag EasyBibEvents and add that to the tweet. You can also ping me directly on my Twitter handle, EdTechJam, right there. And I'll be tracking the questions that way as well. So Matt has a lot of content to go through today, so we're actually going to be saving questions at the end. So don't worry if you don't have any questions until the end. We will have time then to discuss them. So with all of that said, I am now very happy to introduce today's presenter. Matthew Farber is a lot of things. He is a social studies teacher at Valley View Middle School in New Jersey. He's a doctoral candidate in educational technology leadership at the New Jersey City University. He is a contributing blogger and writer for Edutopia, KQED, and even the ever-famous Imagine Easy blog. Certainly, probably not as authoritative as Edutopia, but there's still some good content on there, if I do say so myself. He's also the author of Gamify Your Classroom, a field guide to game-based learning. Great book. You can purchase it on Amazon, and I'm sure Matt will have more information about that as well. So I can't wait to see what he has to share today. Matt, I will pass it off to you. I'm going to turn off my video and mute my mic once we're all set up, but the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. I won't quite share my screen yet, but I will. My name is Matt Farber, and I have PowerPoint with some screenshots, and I have a lot of links. I'll kind of leave that slide up a little bit longer, where all the links are housed, which is on a wiki, pretty easy to get to. And there's a comment also on the bottom of the wiki and my contact information also, because you know, professional development, webinars, and things like that shouldn't just be, you know, an hour here, an hour there. They should be ongoing.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's always the big, one of the biggest complaints, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a webinar, so not a lot in the way of hands-on activities, unfortunately, but that's the nature of a webinar. but I do try to keep it very content rich. So I will share the screen here. Let's make sure I click the right buttons, entire screen. There we go. Whoa, look at that.
It's like Inception.
That is like Inception. That's crazy. Okay, so here we go. Much better.
Looks good. All right, Matt, I'm just going to switch off my video, but I'll be here if you need me.
Sure, absolutely.
Cool.
Well, here we are. So interactive and explorable, learning with text-based games. And here you have an image in the front, which is classic interactive fiction. By classic, I mean 1970s, 80s, 90s, pre-graphical user interface, the C prompt blinking there. And there's your choice. You are in an open field west of a big white house with a boarded front door. There is a small mailbox here. What do you do? That's the lore of that blinking cursor box. Now, interactive fiction has been around for quite some time. I'm going to talk a little bit about its history and where we are now with interactive fiction. And there's a bit of a resurgence in the medium. And it is one of the lowest barriers to bring into the classroom for game-based learning. My name, again, is Matthew Farber. There's my Twitter handle, my website, and my email. All of the links are there on the bottom. As Emily said, I'm a social studies teacher. I teach in middle school. I am a play tester also. My class is play tested for Brain Pop and Institute of Play and Glass Lab and several other developers and designers, Eline Media as well. I live in New Jersey, and I have a master's degree in educational technology, and I'm a doctoral candidate in EdTech leadership. So this slide will be on at the end if you also need the links. And there's me. I guess I just read all of that. So I'll just stare at myself in the brick wall. Okay, so there's my book. So about a year ago, I wrote a book because I saw that there were some books about specific topics or case studies or big thinker style books about learning that happens while playing games. As you can hear, I'm still in a school.
It gives an authentic environment.
Yes,
it's probably
yes.
a familiar sound for many of us.
Yes, I'm literally in a school right now. So anyway, there was a lot of buzz last year about gamification and game-based learning, but a lot on gamification. I have it in my title, but my book is mainly about game-based learning, which is playing games, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What I did was I curated content basically from the space of game-based learning, which is a kind of a tight space, a small, close-knit community, and I interviewed many of the developers, designers, and teachers, and wanted to see the similarities, what was being done, innovations, that sort of thing. And I put that in the book here, which is meant to be for beginners, basically, or anybody that wants to learn more about the topic. And each chapter ends with resources, lesson plan ideas, and games to play as well, because that's what it's all about. Before I get into what games are, I do want to show one thing. Yesterday, I went to, I was honored to be invited to this, the Games for Learning Summit, which was hosted by the United States Department of Education, and Games for Change, which is an event that began today in New York City, which I'll talk about a little bit later, as well as the Entertainment Software Association. That's the lobby agency that rates video games, and the ESRB, if you've seen that on video games or children's video games. And many groups were there, Brain Pop, iCivics, Edmodo, Ubisoft. They make Guitar Band, for instance, and Rocksmith. And, this is a big embrace from the United States Department of Education. There were teachers present, there were professors, game designers. It was like a greatest hits of everybody in the game-based space. And it was all yesterday at NYU. And much of the event was live streamed, so it's certainly worth checking out further. But interactive fiction was one of the topics. Twine was one of the applications, and I'll get into that. But just something topical that just happened yesterday seemed quite relevant to not just games or game-based learning, but where we are now in game-based learning. So what are games? This is a game called Monument Valley. And as you could see, it's maybe you've played it. This was Apple's app Game of the Year app for last year. Now, what's amazing about this app is it looks like an M.C. Escher drawing, kind of like an optical illusion. And you tap the screen, and the little girl there with the white hat moves where you tap. And you have to get her from one part of the puzzle to the other part of the puzzle. There are no points. There's no fail state, so you don't lose. You never die. There's no badges. You win. Badges seem to be everywhere. If you have maybe a fitness tracker like Fitbit, you get badges that way, or, of course, in games. You just advance and interact with the puzzle, and the satisfaction is getting Ida from point A to point B. So it's simple, and it's a game without relying on any real extrinsic motivators, like high scores, for instance. So games are many things. This is one definition. I've come across many, many definitions. Jay McGonigal, who wrote the book Reality is Broken in 2011, defined games as systems. And that's what games do very well. They're interconnected systems of cause and effect, which becomes another cause, of a goal, rules, a feedback system, and voluntary participation. Now, in the game I just showed, the goal is to get Ida from one point of the screen to the other. The rules are she can't, let's say here, she can't walk off a ledge. I can't have her walk into the blue. She can only walk forward. So there are certain rules and restrictions. Tic-tac-toe, you can't put an O in a box that already has an X in it. There are rules. There's a feedback system. That's one of the reasons that everybody, not just children, like games. That's one of the promises of game-based learning, digital and non-digital, is instant feedback. Even a paper-based game, you get feedback whether you did something correct or incorrect. Unlike many aspects of school, especially homework, which you'd have to wait till the next day to get that feedback. Something Jesse Schell mentioned, he's a game designer and professor from Carnegie Mellon, mentioned yesterday at the Games for Learning Summit. And of course, voluntary participation, which was a topic I discussed with many people in my book. How do you, quote, force kids to have fun in a game, to voluntarily participate in a so-called fun activity if it's in compulsory education in school? It could be Minecraft, which they love to play at home, and here now there's a grade attached to it. How do you have that happen? And I'll get back to that. But there was no right answer. It's an array of answers, basically. So here's another example: rock, paper, scissors. Paper covers rock. Rock covers scissors. Scissors cuts paper. So this is the interconnected system of a game in its most simplest form. This is a zero-sum game, meaning that there's either one winner or one loser. It's a competitive game as opposed to a cooperative game. In a cooperative game, you would all play together to beat the game or beat the board. Games system gets set in motion by core mechanics. Core mechanics are actions that you do over and over in a game. This is not a complete list, by the way. They can include arguing, trading, voting, exploring, jumping, guessing, role-playing, resource management, like beat the clock, time as a resource, press your luck, which is randomness. Those are all different types of mechanics, and some layer on. Good games match mechanics with the goal of the game. Student asked me the other day when we were designing games in class, my social studies class, if drawing is a mechanic, like, in Pictionary. And yes, drawing is a mechanic. You might notice that they're all verbs also. So here's an example. This is the famous game, Oregon Trail. And this is an article printed by Brendan Trombley from the Institute of Play in New York City. And here are the mechanics, which are managing resources, making decisions. And you can match that to the learning goals, which you're, as a teacher, which you might be, might recognize those as Bloom's taxonomy. Systems thinking, this is what games do really well, especially interactive fiction, but I don't know if it's any more so than other games, but it's very obvious with interactive fiction. They're understanding linkages and examining linkages between everything is interconnected, and this is a graphic from the Institute of Play as well. Everything is interconnected. So games teach that really well. You play a game, you understand that what you do will have an effect, and that effect will have another cause and something else. Now, it's very familiar in English language arts. This is from the Hunger Games. So each character can be webbed out like this. Game design grammar. Games, as you saw before, they're designed with action verbs, just like Bloom's taxonomy. So if you play a game like bingo with students, which is not necessarily student-centered, students may not follow the game, they may just sit there, but some may follow the game. If you call out an item, they are simply identifying or recalling the event, which might be okay if you want to review and review. But more higher order thinking skills would match higher order thinking game mechanic verbs, which is something that should be considered. And reading in interactive fiction or writing in interactive fiction is not the only mechanic. The goal might be empathy. The mechanic might be to fail often to understand failure. There are different goals that come across from interactive fiction. And this is something from the Folger Shakespeare Institute. And it is important to make sure that you match up the learning goal to the mechanic. Otherwise, you get this. I showed this the other day to at a workshop, and a teacher mentioned that she had one of these in her library. So, you want to make sure that you are having a project in a class or an activity in a class that really matches with what the objective is. Good games align core mechanics with learning goals. And similarly, your lessons can as well, or should. Otherwise, you get this. Chocolate-covered broccoli, which is, believe it or not, the technical term for games that do not do this. This is like a game like Math Blaster or Reader Rabbit. These are games that were in the edutainment era in the 1990s. In Math Blaster, which is still produced, you have to solve a math problem to shoot an alien. One has nothing to do with the other. So text-based gaming predates edutainment. It actually goes back to Don Woods, and his partner's name is slipping my mind, and it's not on this particular slide, but that's okay. They're one of the first people to come up with this game called Adventure, and it was like a colossal cave, and it's text-based gaming. And I'll show some screenshots of some other games. Then there's Zork. Zork 1, Zork 2 is a whole series of Zork games. And then you have Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. And they go all the way up to Inform 7 today, which I will show as well. There are also Choose Your Own Adventure books. These are the books, I remember owning all three of these books growing up. These are still produced, but the golden era of Choose Your Own Adventure was in the mid to late 1970s and early 1980s. And this is threaded storytelling with multiple endings. It's a little bit different. It's a subgenre. Interactive fiction is, there's parser type interactive fiction, which is that blinking cursor where you can type anything. There's this where it's like multiple choice threaded endings. What was interesting at the movement in the early 1980s was Douglas Adams actually took his book and adapted it to become interactive fiction himself. And here is a screenshot. This is produced by Infocom, which is one of the leading companies in this time period. This is from 1984, for producing interactive fiction. Having an inventory is part of the game mechanic too, which you could use certain items at certain points. Bartle's player type comes in the mid-1990s. In 1996, game designer Richard Bartle was authoring text-based worlds, as well as especially multi-user dungeons. One of the most popular ones was Ultima Online, which was a text-based virtual world where you play with many players on the fledgling internet of 1996. Richard Bartle, whom I interviewed in my book, created this player type theory that you see the graphic here before you. He realized that game designers should not just be making games that other game designers would want to play, but that they should be making games that everybody wants to play. And example he gave me was a brewer may make beer, but may not even like beer. In another book I read, Richard Bartle said that Halston made dresses, but Halston didn't wear dresses. You know, you design for other people. Teachers design lessons for students. You know, I'm not 12 years old. My intended audience for my lesson is 12 years old. You know, what they like is different than what I like. And then there's multiple learning beyond that. And this is similar in a way. People play games for 4 different reasons. They're killers, which doesn't mean literally always. You know, in chess, when you are more aggressive and you want to take other pieces off the chessboard, that makes you a, quote, killer. An achiever is somebody that always wants to win. A socializer may play just for the social aspect. You know, you may play like canasta, mahjong. You know, those are games you just meet to play with people. Poker buddies, they get together, they play. They may not always want to win. Explorers also, those are people that like to snoop around virtual worlds. And many video games these days have something for everybody here. Interactive fiction today. Oh, by the way, before I go back, this model here is used in gamification a lot, from the app for Starbucks, where you get little gold stars. Those are for achievers. Or if you are on a Fitbit, you may get certain rewards based on Bartle's player types, but this is not what it was intended for. It was really intended for those text-based worlds. Interactive fiction today, where are we now? Well, you could see the waning interest, you could probably guess, of wanting to have text on a screen when you could have high-speed, high-definition graphics and controllers and thousands of players, like in World of Warcraft. But it's still alive and well today. This is a game called Device 6, which is an iPad game. It might be iPhone also. And this gives you an opportunity to play with text on the screen. It's not quite the same as interactive fiction, as parser-based interactive fiction, but these are all extensions of interactive fiction. This is a story. Basically, you read a story, and then you get choices. You don't know. Sometimes you move the screen around. There's music. There's sound, and you really get personal with the story by looking for clues before you can advance to the next parts of the story. Mass Effect is a AAA or high-budget, high-quality game um, that came out from about 2 or 3 years ago. It was published, I believe, by BioWare, and published by, then released by Electronic Arts. And it even worked on a Kinect. You could actually just say, how is the crew? And then you would get stories spread out. But there was an outcry because there were multiple endings to Mass Effect 3 that depended on all the choices the player previously made in the game. And many people got the bad ending or the mediocre ending, and there was an outcry. Choices in games must appear to matter. Clearly, they don't really matter. It's like an artificial intelligence. You make a choice in a game, it may appear to matter, but you really have to pay attention to that because there was an outcry here. This is a Facebook group. They wanted a better ending. In fact, Electronic Arts eventually, after this, in the summer that this took place, about, 2 or 3 years ago, they released downloadable content with different endings. I went to YouTube and I just watched all 5 endings. I actually didn't even notice that big of a difference, but you play a game for hours and hours with threaded choices here and there, expectations get high. Today we have games that do appear to remember what you say. This is Telltale Games' The Walking Dead, an award-winning game from one of the premier story engines. This is a storyline of the popular graphic novel and, of course, the AMC television series, The Walking Dead. This one involves the little girl Clementine. And here's an example early in the game. The gentleman in the back of the taxi cab, he's the protagonist, and you have to answer on his behalf, basically. Why do you say that? And you get a certain amount of time also. The little white line here in the middle, you have a time limit to say or to answer the question. And there's, there's some action in the app. Here and there, you have to swipe up to fight a zombie or that sort of thing. But I would say maybe 80 or 90% of it is that interactive graphic novel approach where you're making choices and characters say they remember the choices. I haven't played. It's not as if it was a choose your own adventure book where you could just thumb back through the pages to try the other endings. So I'm only assuming that when it says it will remember your endings, it remembers your endings. Here's another scene later in the game series. They're released as episodes. So when I played the game, episode 1 was free, and then episode 2 through 5 was $4 or $5 each. But it's a nice long experience, and it's also playable on consoles and on computer and of course iPad. But it is graphically violent. I wouldn't quite show this in a K through 12 school, maybe in 10 through 12 with a parent note. It is interesting to show, the ethical choices people make, and you could have a discussion on that. But this is where games are now. This would be, I'm assuming, more clearly child-friendly is Telltale's adaptation of Minecraft, the popular block building game where it's, in creative mode and you could build anything, basically. Telltale was given the task of making a story mode, and it's not quite done yet, but this is a screenshot from the website about the progress that they're making so far. So there's a massive demand for fiction set in the Minecraft universe, which is fantastic news for children that play Minecraft, which they could just wind up reading the stories just based on the fact that Minecraft is attached to it, and it's already interesting to them. And here are some of the choices you might get here. Again, it's very limited. This is just like a little teaser that they put out on their website. Mission US is a series of games, which is choice-driven role-playing game. And There's been some articles here and there about some of the Mission US missions, but I should note that they are games. They should be contextualized in the classroom. That's the role of the teacher, to explain why games are being played, what the decisions are. There are lesson plans that come with the games. Mission US gives you missions here. This is choices here, I should say. This is from the Revolutionary War mission, which I've used in my class. And you have win states and lose states, basically, or fail states, which is basically, if you're playing a choose your own adventure style book, where you get multiple endings, one's the good ending, one's the bad ending. I explain it very simply to my class. It's, you see two doors in front of you. You see a red door and a blue door. Which door do you open? The blue door, you float off into space. The red door, you win $1 million. Those are the choices you get to make. So I interviewed the designers of this game, and because it's a school-based game, they had to take into account that the fail state can't really kick you out of the game and make you start over a 45-minute game, because that's just not logistically feasible in a class. So the fail state might be, you have to go, do some chores in the back of the house for 2 rounds, and then you come back to the main storyline. In fact, I show this next graphic to my students. This is the map within the game where they recreated Boston, and this is actually how they did it. As simple as that, cards and Post-its showing how these stories interconnect right there with arrows. And this is literally the paper prototype of the game right here. I almost threw it out. I was like, no, picture. Here's a game that was released days ago. Common Sense Media, which is a fantastic service to learn about appropriateness of movies, books, and video games, and anything for kids. They are a nonprofit, and they released this game called Digital Compass, Where Are You Headed?, which is a social emotional learning game that uses that choice-based, choose-your-own-adventure mechanic. And again, most of these games are linked in the wiki that I showed before, and I'll show at the end. 80 Days is another game. This is from Inkle, which is a fantastic application I'm going to show as well later on. But they produced this game called 80 Days, which is based on the book Around the World in 80 Days, and you choose your path. You can go to Berlin, you can go somewhere else on the map. That is certainly your choice, and then of course you get even more choices there, and you control the ending of the story. Inkle also adapted Frankenstein, and here it's beautifully done. The pages move, and you can move and change the different endings based on your choices. And it's complete with some sounds and orchestrated with original music. A Dark Room. Here's a screenshot here, and I'm going to X out of here, and I'm going to show A Dark Room because I have some of these slides open. X out of here. Okay, so A Dark Room. I will refresh the screen, and I like to play lights off. And I use this game in my class. It's a resource management game, so it seems basically simple. You stoke the fire, build traps, you have a hut, and not much going on really. It's very simple, right? But it gets more and more difficult. You have to go out for fur. You can leave this area. You can go to the tiny village. Okay, you can gather wood for your fire. And you're really basically just taking care of your yourself, trying to survive in the woods. And I use this game to teach about the 13 colonies and settlement. It works well with the Jamestown plantation as well as the Plymouth plantation where the Pilgrims were, because it's just so simple, but it's involving. it just seems like, you're just doing your chores, clicking buttons, stoking the fire, and you are somewhat progressing, and the game does get more difficult, but not much. And it's strangely addictive. I'll just say that. Oh, another announcement.
A minor interruption.
Minor interruption. Hopefully nobody in the webinar is taking the late bus today. So that's a dark room, which you can play as a light room, as you can see, with the white background, which I'm guessing is for people who want to play games while they're at work and their boss isn't watching. But it works really well in school. Here's the Stanley Parable, which is an award-winning game that came out a couple of years ago. It's a point-and-click style game. It's an exploration game. And it's a little bit less defined about what the win and loss state is. Some games in this genre of interactive and explorable fiction, they really push the envelope of what a game really is. You don't necessarily need to win a game for it to be a game. The Stanley Parable is quite complex in its story conditions, as you can see from this infographic. You can make all sorts of choices, like the door you see in the middle, and it spreads all over the place. There's no one win space. It's not like you're trying to bankrupt every player in Monopoly. There are many, many things, many choices, many multiple endings, and then you just take it from there. It actually made an appearance on House of Cards Season 3, which debuted in January or February, and there you see Kevin Spacey as Frank Underwood playing it on his computer, and he didn't even quite understand the game, but he was just so really into the game, he kept replaying and replaying. So, it's another example of how video games are ubiquitous. In the show, he also plays Monument Valley, which becomes a plot point in the game, in the show, I should say, which was the game with a little girl trying to move across that interactive puzzle. Gone Home is a point-and-click style game, not quite interactive fiction, but worth showing here because text-based gaming and explorables is the name of the webinar, and I was broadening it out besides just interactive fiction because it also has the storytelling exploration element to it. In fact, it calls itself a story exploration video game. This game looks like a haunted house game. There's the ominous house. Walk inside, there's the large staircase like you would see in a haunted house. There's a thunderstorm outside. The house is empty, and you have come back from abroad, and the family is not at home. So you snoop around the house. And the mechanic of looking around the house, which is empty here, you uncover things around the house. Uncover things about a seemingly normal family that is troubled. I don't want to spoil the plot points here, but I did write an article about this for KQED Mindshift, in which I interviewed Paul DeVarcy, a teacher up in Toronto, and I also he uses this in his English language arts class to teach close reading, and he has many units in here. The game takes place in 1995, and I spoke to the creator of the game. He came from the commercial game space, and his name is Steve Gaynor. He helped BioShock. He create levels and parts of BioShock 2 and BioShock Infinite, which is basically a first-person shooter and slasher game. But in the game, you find objects, and the story gets pieced together through found messages. And that's what this is here. You find objects in the house. There's little signs. There's little notes. There's audio recordings. You find a cassette, and you find the radio and insert the tape. And you learn more and more about the everyday horrors of everyday life in this house. There's no win state. You don't win Gone Home. The mechanic of point and click here is what games were like in the 1990s. And it's kind of evoking that era. And there was an interesting quote that basically DeVarcy told me that like a literature unit, you're substituting a written text with a game's text. And there is text in the game. There's notes that you find here. This is the note from Samantha. And it's about, her some of her struggles growing up, and the parental struggles growing up. And even though everything looks nice on the veneer on the outside. And Steve Gaynor, the designer of the game, told me that players paint the final picture of what those individual pieces mean and then discuss it with other people. He also said that it's a clear demonstration of how much the narrative process happens in your head as opposed to on the page or on the screen. So, by finding these objects, you are putting the story together as you go. And it's really innovative, and it won an award last year at Games for Change. Here's another one similar called The Novelist, where you play as the novelist in this house, and you uncover different items pointing and clicking along. The next genre I wanted to show, besides the explorable point and click genre, is Explorable Explanations, which is doing a little digging. It's a few years old, but it's actually considered super new. One is, this is sort of in that genre. This is something the BBC just came out with called Syrian Journey. In Europe, there are refugees from from Syria, from the civil war there, and they're coming up. And this is intended to create empathy for people, for families that are displaced by war, and you make choices about where to settle and where to not settle. This plays in a blog. It's basically an interactive blog. Here's another one called Parable of the Polygons, and the great thing about Google Hangout is that I can just pop right out here and go right into the website that's live. Parable of the Polygons is nominated for a Games for Change award, which is a transformative game or social impact game award. And here you have what looks like a blog post by Nikki Hart, and I'll scroll back here. V. Hart and Nikki Case. Sorry, put them together. And this is the post here. But as you read, you see that to make the polygons happy, they prefer to be with other, they prefer to be in a diverse crowd. Rather than reading all this text, you get to play with the text. And there are all sorts of simulations that run here. And it's quite powerful. So it really fits in like game-like reading. And these are called explorables. Explorable Explanations. And this is an article from the person that I believe credited the term, Brett Victor. And it uses a reactive document, which is coded that way. So it's, this is a lot of technical math here, which is way above my skill set. But, and here's another article here about this. And there's some good quotes here about reactive documents. They allow the reader to play with the author's assumptions and analysis. And these are both from Brett Victor. And, you are really playing with the system. Here's an example here from Brett Victor from Ancient History in 2011. And he gives examples here. And, you can just click through the simulator, seeing the math of it all. So this is really a simulator of a reactive document because cars and games just don't move. They're moving because, oh my God, it's math, right? So there it is. Another example is Earth, a Primer. And I could mute it, I guess, a lot of dramatic music. But basically, this is an iPad book. It's a $10 textbook where you play with the pages. So, you see a volcano, well, you can put your finger on the screen and pull it up and make a volcano, or you can make a mountain, And it's playable, explorable, yet it's tied to text and to reading. And this is an emerging genre or subgenre. In fact, at Carnegie Mellon University, there at the end of this month is the Now I Get It Jam, which is part of their Entertainment Technology Center. That's where Shell Games, Jesse Shell's game studio, is headquartered, and they're going to have a transformational game jam. A game jam is where you have a limited amount of time and you must make a game. It reminds me a little bit of improv theater. Like, here's your topic, go. So you have a short amount of time to make a game in teams, 2 days, and the challenges here are, here's some of the posted challenges so far. Okay, how food stamps work. Okay, make a game out of it. But it's not just a game. The game should be explorable. That's really the theme for this particular game jam. So, it should be an explorable interaction like Parable of the Polygons, which is, one of the more well-known in this genre. Now back to the presentation, because I don't want to run out of time here. But some of these are screenshots from from Parable of the Polygons, which works, again, in many different disciplines. You could see in math with the graph they showed there, in social studies and language arts, and there's, of course, the science behind this, like an Earth, a primer. So, you could use interactive fiction across the curriculum. Spent is another one. Spent is a game, basically, with text where you make decisions, and, it really drives home how hard it can be to dig yourself out of a financial debt. Touchtone is a game that is not entirely school appropriate unless it was in high school, because there's some bad language in it, but you could preview some levels to players, to students, I should say. And basically, this is a game that uses the mechanic of a puzzle, and the puzzle is it was co-created by one of the designers of Threes, the popular number sliding app. And you basically move around to connect puzzles, and then what you get here between levels is you are to listen into phone calls, read emails, and hack into people's text messages, and then do your good deed and report them to the government. Is it pertinent information or non-pertinent information? It's almost like that Milgram shock treatment, where you're supposedly shocking someone in the next room by turning them in. It really uses this mechanic to teach complicity, which is really high level. There's a couple of bad words here and there, PG-13, I would say, that I've discovered in later levels, not early on in the game. But if you want to show complicity, you could screenshot some of the levels on the board. This is the puzzle mechanic here. Once you touch and everything lights up, then you make your decision here based on the reading. And the reading is meaningful because you're participating and working with it. Speaking of meaningful, and I'm going to go through these a little quicker because I want to make sure Emily shoots me some questions. Authoring tools. Inform 7 is one of the best out there. And this really makes that parser-based interactive fiction, where you see that blinking cursor. Now, this was a little bit above my skill set. So I teamed up last year with Aaron Hoffman, who is the lead game designer for Glass Lab. They did Argubot Academy and SimCity EDU. And we made an interactive fiction game that took place during the American Revolution, where you make choices here. And you could take a canister, and then you go through Boston Common, and you have to get a message to Samuel Adams. And we looked at old documents and old maps, and it's very immersive with just text. And you really learn about, playing the game, you have to have a grasp of direction, like north, south, east, west, like that, northwest. And you have to you have to type, spell, and close read to go on in the game. Here's another example. Then there's some fail states, but nothing too bad. You know, you don't want to be thrown out of the game entirely and lose 45 minutes of learning in the class. Twine is the most popular that I'm aware of application to create choice-based stories like choose your own adventure style stories. It's free, and the finished product you can embed anywhere. This is a story I linked called Howling Dogs, and these are just screenshots of the choices, and you just click the blue and you can make all sorts of different choices here in the interconnected system. This is a professor, Scott Nicholson, from Syracuse University. He runs the Because Play Matters studio there. And his website for his class uses Twine. Twine was part of the Games for Learning Summit yesterday also. And here you can just click through. So it's an interesting way just to draw students in. Coding, which is really what you're doing here, without all the actual coding. You know, you're teaching, you're working with a system. And it's a famous quote from Steve Jobs. I think everybody in this country should learn how to program a computer because it teaches you how to think. To that end, this is what you're doing. And you're creating a meaningful experience, another quote from Mary Flanagan, and I show this to my students this year. You're creating something called player agency, where the player is not just the first person in the story, the player is in the story. You don't want to lose the story. So the last piece I'm showing here is Inkle Writer, which my students just used. 6th grade, 12-year-old students created, in teams, they made Inkle Writer stories about Middle Ages, medieval times, and they each had subtopics. One was the Crusades, one was knights, one was dress and clothing, one was the role of the church, and then they went and they made interactive stories. This is a drag and drop interface. It's completely free. It's from the makers of 80 Days. It's super simple to use. The tutorial is an interactive story. So, you know, you play the tutorial, learn the game. I had no technical issues. I had no issues with students who had IEPs or reading issues. Everybody was able to turn in their Inkle story. You can create an account using a made-up name. They tell you can do that because they don't send you anything. It's only if you lost your email address. So you can make them all. I made them all at farber.com. And it won an award from the AASL, and I'll get some screenshots here. I know I'm not leaving a lot of time for questions, but here's a story that one of my students wrote about knighthood. She did this in one night, no pun intended. She dragged in pictures. You could just put the link in from Google Images. And not only is this telling you what it's like to be a knight, but the fail state, if you make the wrong choices, the non-chivalrous choices, you lose the game. So you're rewarded for being chivalrous. So not only are you immersed in what it's like to become a knight by her story, but you also learn about chivalry because you must make the chivalrous decision. You shouldn't attack, you defend, you sidestep, and then you win, you get rewarded. So not only is the story telling you a story, not only are you in the story by having an agency, player agency in the story, but the reward mechanisms set up in interactive fiction are very powerful for teaching, especially in a project-based learning setting. So the students weren't just showing their projects on the interactive whiteboard and everybody's zoning out. Today we played each other's projects. I put them all on a website. Here's a rubric that I found from a website linked there on the bottom. Sensory details, different endings. But I found that students were writing even more than they normally would if they were writing an essay. So I put them all on a website here, and they just click through, and they played each other's stories. And I just click here, and here's another story, and do I defend? Do I attack? And you have multiple endings. So it's super fast, super easy to do. And I will leave up this last slide here if you have any questions. Emily? Cool.
Thanks, Matt. That was a wonderful webinar. I know that we've had a couple of questions come in where people, I think I just flipped myself. Hold on one second.
I can put my face back on.
Yes, if you wish.
Yeah, oh, there I
There
am.
you go. There you are. Perfect. So we did have a couple questions come in, and we've got about 5 minutes left or so. And a lot of them were along the same sort of theme. So I'm just going to ask one that came in from Brent. This one came in over Twitter. And Brent asked, do you have any suggestions for best practices or ideas for blending these games into your lesson plans? These are all really great examples at all different grade levels and different subject areas. But if you have any, and I think that's sort of a webinar in itself, sort of incorporating these games, but if you have any general best practices or tips for blending them into your lessons, and also when you do use games with your students, how long do you let them play these games during the class, or is it more of a homework assignment or a flipped instruction type of implementation?
I really cut back on homework because homework has no feedback until the next day.
Right.
Unless the homework involves feedback, like a brain pop video where you get the answer right away. I prefer to use games to deliver content. I don't like to use games for fast finishers or for review. So it can be anything that supports the learning. So with Inkle Writer, you have the two things going on. You've got the message as well as the story itself through the reward systems there. And you don't have to rely on, quote, gamification and points and badges. It's all in there by whether or not you want to proceed or not. I think a good best practice is to put it everywhere. Like Dr. Nicholson has on his website, it's actually interactive fiction. You make choices based on, what parts of the course you want to see. It kind of sparks students' interest. And, I have them play, and then they come up with their own ideas. It's a great exit ticket,
Right.
What should be the next level? What do you think should happen next?
Cool. I know that if people do have other follow-up questions, that you are all over Twitter. That's actually how we first met, was on Twitter. So if anyone here watching today does have any follow-up questions for Matt, if you need to drop off because you have other stuff to do, no problem. He's on Twitter. His handle is his name, Matthew Farber. Another question that came in, you shared that great wiki space, and to everyone watching, we are going to send it out on Twitter. We're going to send it in the follow-up email as well. You curated a whole book about these different types of games. Is there a one-stop shop that you like or resource that you like to go to where these games are either listed by if they're browser-based or if they're downloaded or if they're free versus paid? Or is it really just something that you sort of do on your own
Yeah,
basis?
that was like one of the things when I wrote the book. There wasn't really. Everything's just everywhere. There is something called the IFDB, which is the Interactive Fiction Database.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so that has a lot of the informed, the parser-based, the blinking cursor ones. And then you could just look on Twinery, is where Twine is. I have an article I listed also that has some of the award. There's an award. There's the IF Comp, which is the competition. IF is interactive fiction, and has that double meaning of if, then, the logic statement,
Right.
which is really what is going on there.
Very cool. Okay, that helps. And I know the wiki space has tons of resources. So again, everyone just keep an eye out for that on Twitter and also in your email. Another question that came up, I'm not sure if you're in a one-to-one iPad or Chromebook school, but obviously there's many schools out there that are sort of limited in the amount of technology that each student has. So do you have any advice on having multiple students share one or a few devices if there isn't enough to go around?
Yeah, you can have them work in teams to author it. And what I did when they were presenting, I had them actually have the class silently vote on which path they wanted to take on their Inkle story. So they did that by vote. And then I had the students present the win, the winning ending.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so that seems like a good workaround, and it's something that you've done personally. So that's great that, it's something you've already kind of worked.
Yeah, and I've also noticed you can use games and stations, so it could be supported by other content. You could have 2 or 3 computers running this, and that could be the interactive fiction station. And, they actually did library research prior to getting to the station.
Got it.
So you can work around the room. It fits right in a project-based learning situation with learning centers.
Great. One more question, since we do only have a couple of minutes left. which of these games that you talked about today, or even if you didn't include it in the session, have you used as of late, like most recently with your students in the classroom?
I've used Mission US, the Revolutionary War mission. I used Time Society because that's my students, but I was really, really intrigued by Inkle Writer. I haven't used that before. And what I did was I piloted it. So the one I showed with the knight, I had one student. I said, see how this is. Let me know, if it's clear to use. Is it easy? Was it fun? And then she gave me feedback. The way you would pilot any product or anything, really, if you were selling something or designing something. And then I got a positive response. And then, I told the class also, it's, I consider them co-designers or participatory designers in their learning. So I asked a lot of feedback. Because it's the first year I used it, it was new. And the response was very positive.
Great.
And anybody finish early, they can make one for fun, which several did. And you're not going to get that too often writing essays.
Yeah, for sure. And it's great that you're sort of, gathering feedback as you try out these different games. That's obviously a critical part of effective technology implementation in schools, and something that I think sometimes people would just overlook. So it's great that you're sort of including that. Okay, so we actually just reached the top of the hour, 4 o'clock here in New York, and also in New Jersey, where Matt is. So Matt, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For this great webinar. I know a lot of people have been singing your praises, and it's been a real pleasure working with you. So we really appreciate you taking time to sort of share your extensive knowledge on interactive fiction and text-based games with us today.
Thanks so much. And also, I just had this, I forgot these are on my desk, story cubes. These are great too. Yeah, so if you don't know how to start your story with a class and they're writing interactive fiction, you roll these dice, and there's different little things here.
Cool.
Get kids going,
Very nice. All right, everyone, stay tuned. We'll be having more webinars coming up in May, including one, we haven't actually officially announced it yet, but we're going to be having a webinar going on with Steven Anderson, which will be really great. So we'll be shooting you an email with more information about that in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, you can find me on Twitter. I am EdTechJam. Matt's on Twitter. His handle is Matthew Farber. And thank you guys so much for checking out Imagine Easy Solutions webinar today, and hope to see you at another session soon.
Thanks again.